What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The Celestial Compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Beal. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Beal.
Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to Celestial Compass. I'm Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net. And I want to start with a tiny bit of an update of the forecast for the month of July. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of things that are happening down here on Earth. July has in the center of it a really, really rocky time with Uranus, the planet of sudden volatile change, conjunct Mars, the planet of action, cosmic first responder, on the 15th, causing all kinds of crazy, volatile, surprising things to be happening. You might have noticed some in the news. And then later in the week, we have the second Capricorn full moon of the year, conjunct Pluto, the other cosmic change agent, the agent of unavoidable change. I encourage you to look at this time in your life as the moment in a construction or a remodeling project. That's the better analogy for it. When you've been banging around at stuff and walls are starting to fall and the slightest little touch is causing things to break off, and by the weekend, by the full moon, you're just taking stuff to a giant dumpster that you have in the driveway and putting all kinds of things in it. So this is an excellent time for purging, for knocking things out of your life, for recognizing what isn't really supporting you, what is not sustainable, and doing something about it. This particular time is setting the stage emotionally for Pluto's last time through the sign of Capricorn, which is going to happen at the beginning of September until the middle of November. So we're clearing the decks emotionally for what is going to be a bigger picture final pass through the restructuring of our infrastructure and foundations and institutions. You can find a lot more about this in my forecasts. My moon forecasts and monthly forecasts are at omtimes.com, and they are also, along with my weekly forecast, at my site, empowermentunlimited.net. And you can also find a lot of information on my YouTube channel, Professional Aquarian. Now, you might be, if you're listening to this live or actually kind of close afterwards, you're possibly a bit concerned about what is going on politically on the whole globe. There was a move in Britain with an election that looks like the really reactionary conservative forces that have been in control have pretty much been booted out of control. In France, the moderates and the progressives got together to keep the far right from taking control of the government. I believe something similar has happened in Iran. What in the world is going on in the United States with all of this? And I have, to discuss this, someone who is a personal touchstone for me, someone that I talk to on a regular basis about what is going on. And we have slightly different, actually we have very different approaches and come to extremely similar conclusions. So I'd like to welcome back Andrew Bassano Brewer, a clairvoyant, astrologer, and past life reader, researcher, author of multiple books, trained in channeling and psychic development with Sanea Roman, past life regression with Dr. Helen Wambach, peaceful warrior training with Dan Millman, clinical hypnotherapy with Dr. A.M. Krasner, and just general badass psychic. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much. It's always fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Sure. Now, you read the energy of situations. It's imbued with your knowledge of astrology, but can you start with talking us through the process that you use for how you get your information?
So what I try to do is understand collective emotion. This works for an individual, it works for a group. And so, as an example, many years ago, 2006 or so, I was still a corporate executive, but I started thinking about housing. And I felt that people were going to be sad about their houses. Well, so that sadness about their houses led me to start talking about an upcoming crash in the real estate market. The same kind of thing happened prior to 2020. I said, people seem sad they seem all stressed. Something's going to happen. It's probably going to have an impact on the economy. I mean, this is a simplistic way to do it, but there's a kind of a pervasive angst that you can feel. So you and I have talked about this. I don't really feel that kind of angst on a collective level with the United States. To me, the United States is getting more like in balance. So prior to President Trump, I talked a lot about the issues that I expected with President Trump, which probably put me in the minority at the time. But what happened with him is he seemed to bring all these disparate elements to the forefront. And so that was the driving force, but that only has so much energy. I think that energy is actually dissipating. So no matter how much people may see President Trump, or former President Trump, as a disruptive force, and the MAGA movement as a disruptive force, in my opinion, that movement is getting smaller. So when you look at it on an individual level, most people, when they have significant reactions to something, are typically coupling that with something that predates that specific point of contact. So I might get really bent out of shape having a conversation with a particular person, but what I'm more likely doing is reacting to what it reminds me of before my conscious brain can really go there. So something happened to me when I was 2, this is why I'm reacting to it at age 69. So simplistically, what I feel is happening is that the desire to have a kind of a more serene, rational approach to living is the pervasive emotion that I feel is on the horizon, which is why I don't think Trump can win, or why I think Biden will win, and why I think, I predicted a lot of chaos, which nobody wanted to hear, which happened, right? I predicted a rise in anti-Semitism, which nobody wanted to hear, and then those things happen. But what I believe is going to happen now is that we're shifting away from that because I think people are tired of it. And so I think that the Trump era will come to not completely an end, but I think it's winding down.
Well, talk about cutting to the chase. There we go. So I
hope that makes sense how I'm saying it.
No, it makes sense. You just ended up where I thought we would be in about 45 minutes. So specific things, there has been, I definitely have for quite a while, and I don't know how far back this went, found myself feeling similarities to Weimar Germany, which was the precursor
Absolutely.
to all manner of horrible things. And that's something that's also in your mindset, right? You have this thing about punching Nazis, if I look at it correctly.
So in 1980, I became a professional psychic in 1987. And in 1987, I first said publicly that I felt that the 1930s would return, as in the pre-Hitler 1930 or the Hitler era 1930s, and it would return within the United States. And simplistically, that the people that were in Germany in 1930 would have reincarnated in the United States here, and the people, kind of the Germans, were in one sense like the happy people, and the United States was kind of the chaotic energy. So I've been talking about this forever. I've been expecting this totalitarian kind of energy, and you can see it mean, all these different pockets. So Trump, in my opinion, didn't really fundamentally change anything. He just became a focal point where people felt that they had permission now to express what they really felt. So if there was not a collective kind of racist, elitist kind of mentality, then Trump would have been cut off at the pass. So what I think happens with the MAGA movement is you have people who have really low self-esteem and they want to feel special, and they found a spokesperson that feeds that to them. And that's why I think that the MAGA movement has gained the traction that it has. But functionally, they don't work. And I just think that that's why it's running its course. And just like in the past, and we've talked about this for years, when I would say, well, get ready, this is going to happen, or this is going to happen, now I feel the opposite. I tend to be a couple of years ahead of what everybody thinks, which is kind of complicated during that period, right? But so I'm not really event driven. I try to look at the trends. And I just feel that there are more sane, rational, balanced, friendly people in the United States than there are these contentious, hellraisers. And that's why I do think that the pervasive collective emotion in the United States is one of seeking balance rather than trying to destroy everything. So again, simplistically, that's why I think that Trump was able to come to some element of prominence. I mean, we can get into a darker kind of take with this too, but on a surface level, he was giving people permission to kind of go to their darker, more selfish selves. And I think that the collective pushback against that is stronger than anything that he can bring together.
Now, interestingly, at this moment, a lot of things, as we're talking, a lot of things are happening that some perspectives might think, oh no, this is horrible. We're on this collision course. How does this man continue to get away with things? But I just want to interject my own experience in this. After the 2016 election, before the inauguration, I was sitting in a bar in Brooklyn with a friend, and I had a palpable sensation of a train coming right at us, and the people who had the power to steer the train and put it on a different track were letting it come at us. It was a feeling of absolute inevitability and choice and powerlessness. I don't feel that at all now. I don't feel any horrible thing coming at us at all. I am absurdly calm in the long term about things that are going on. And this is going to lead to something that you and I talk about a lot, and that has to do with your vantage point, with your perspective. If you're stuck in the middle of day-to-day events, you can get really, really caught up in the energy of it. But if you play like an Aquarian, and there are two of them on camera right now, you can just get
two full moon Aquarians.
Two full moon Aquarians. You can get in your, I was going to say, let's get in our Cessna or our Piper Cub. It's more than a helicopter, and fly above the situation and get a long distance view. And that is essentially what you do, right?
Absolutely. I think it's really critical not to get too caught up in the weeds. And I'm really good historically at knowing when people are lying and knowing when they're different than what they present themselves to be. So for example, prior to the 2016 election, I said that President Trump would win. This didn't go over well, so I didn't say it too often. And I did it astrologically, actually. I did it in comparison to the 1776 chart with Hillary and with Donald Trump. But what I said then was that Trump was geared more towards this sales energy, that he was more like a, carny and less of a politician, that his management style would be absolute chaos, and that he would drive things forward through trying to cause disruption so that you couldn't really hold him accountable. And to some degree, that works for him. But it also leaves a lot of things that kind of fall through the cracks. And ultimately, those things falling through the cracks, you leave a mess. People want to clean it up. It's important, like I talk about this a lot. I don't look right at people. I try to look at the energy around people, because there's an energetic relationship between an individual and the space in which they have it. This is why the law of attraction is sort of only halfway there. And I talk about that a lot too. We've had these conversations. So when you look at event-driven things, like what happened this weekend with President Trump, to me, changes nothing. It changes nothing. But people are spending a lot of energy trying to decipher it, understand it. Doesn't really matter, because it doesn't impact the long term. And if you get caught up in minutia, you can't really, in my opinion, certainly in the ways in which I work both as a corporate executive and as a clairvoyant, they're kind of the same thing, actually. You have to get away from looking at these one-offs. You have to find there are consistent elements. What are the things that are consistent? And if you step back, you can see those patterns, and those patterns, you can fill those in, and then that gives you a narrative. And from there, you can make predictions. I mean, I made a lot of predictions. I've been pretty good historically at making predictions. And the way in which I do it is to try not to get too caught up in specific little things that are aberrations, but to look at what keeps happening over and over and over. Because that consistency, you can only, you can only con people so long. If you hang around with them long enough, they see who you are. And that's really kind of fundamentally the way I do readings, both on an individual level and on a collective level. I hope I'm making sense in the ways in which I'm trying to describe it, but that's the basic root of what I'm doing.
So what do you say to people who go, oh my God, he gets away with it all the time? I have heard a consistent phrase out of you about this situation.
Trump cannot escape what's coming, nor should he. I've said this for a long time. So just real quickly, I'll recap some of the things I said about President Trump. I said that President Trump would lose the election, but he would contest it. I said that President Trump would try, long before it happened, I said that President Trump would try to fight. People said that's impossible. I said, just kick back and wait. Trump would try to fight, it would fail. I said that the certification process would happen on the 7th rather than the 6th, which is what happened. And then after that, when everybody, Michael Moore and all the rest of the people that were trying to, create this madness, I said, nothing's going to happen. It's already happened. Trump's not going to be there. He will have left, and it will be Biden, and it will be sort of calm. I also said early on that Trump would be held accountable for financial fraud, all the things that have happened in the courts. I said all these things years ago. Now, people will say, well, he still gets away with it, but the game hasn't played out. The foundation is already in place. All these things are in the court system. And I don't worry about what's happened, like with the Supreme Court, the recent decisions with Roe v. Wade or with presidential immunity. Those things are short-term blips. And what happens too often is that people get too caught up in, oh, this happened, it can't. I go, just chill out. You have to step back. And over the long haul, I've been pretty consistently on point. I'm not event driven. I don't worry about events. So if you ask me what's going to happen on Tuesday, I don't know, because that's not how I want to look at things. But I think it's important just to stay in a space of clarity and calmness and not to get too up or down either way. But people will tell you who they are. But what they try to do is tell you what they want you to believe. I'm pretty good at not seeing that either on an individual level or on a collective level. And that's why I think that this push, this Christian nationalism kind of thing is going to fail. They've tried to do it in the past. It's failed. It will fail again. That's what I think.
Well, again, you've said everything I wanted to talk about, so we've still got lots of time.
Okay, then we can add to it. So that's,
yeah,
I got plenty I can say, so that's no problem.
Right. And
I want to talk about Trump's astrology, since I'm with a famous astrologer. So this would be a thing that we can talk about together. One of the things that always jumped out to me with Trump was his Mars. Because what I've found is that when people have a planet that's on the 12th house side of the ascendant within 2 to 3 degrees, excuse me, that tends to work out as some sort of subconscious issue. And so to me, I've always said that Trump was driven by a fear that he was inadequate, like kind of in a way like the traditional short man's disease, and that everything that Trump would do was going to be based on this notion. Trump believed he wasn't good enough, but he was arrogant enough to believe he could get away with it. And that sets up a dynamic where people ultimately make mistakes. So if he gets in a situation where there's a lot of stress and the boy is in a stressful world, then I believe he will make mistakes. But that 12th house Mars led me to think that he would be impulsive and do things as a matter of course. And I think that that plays out in just his day-to-day operations. And I think that's also a reason why I think that he will push himself to the place. I've said for years that Trump will push it and push it and push it and develop this sense that I'm immune, but what he's really going to do is lose it all kind of at one time. And that's what I expect. And so I guess we'll see. But I think it is related to the chart.
Right, and when there is a planet that's just on the backside of an angle, it operates as a pusher of that. And with Mars in Leo conjunct Regulus, so this is like maximum big guy, and that's getting stressed right now. That's getting stressed by Uranus. It's exactly squaring that. That's
for sure.
That's forced action. And that plays a role in someone in guns going off at a talk that he gave. And that's not done with. And it's in his most public part of his chart. And it rules his house of health. And you and I have talked about this, that there's likely, well, you've looked at his chakras, so go ahead. I'll shut up and let you talk.
Well, I mean, I've said for a while that I expected that Trump would begin in part a stress reaction, would start to have physical and cognitive issues, noticeable issues that would have an impact on his ability to run starting in July. Well, it's July. And so just like with President Biden, you know, the things that have happened, President Biden with the debate, I think that this sort of energizes President Biden. I actually think President Biden's energy starts to go up. And I think the former President Trump's energy begins to go down. But Trump doesn't, I want to go another direction, if I may, real quickly. In 2016, when Trump was still in the primaries, I did a past life match for him. You know, my vision of what I thought his past life was. And I said that he was a man who was the former president of Guatemala. Well, this went over, like I said, that he was, Flippo the clown, I guess. But when people look at Trump and they try to ascribe this significance to him, like he's this great person, the one that really cracks me up is that he's patent. Trump doesn't have the energy of someone who is a powerful leader. He has the energy of someone who is a powerful speaker. So Trump is a genius at what he does. He's very good as a speaker. He's no fool, but he does not have the power to bring people together, nor does he really have the intellect to understand complex, organizational matters. So whenever people go, well, he's Mussolini or Hitler or Jesus or whatever, I go, no. The energy that matches Trump is this kind of person, sort of a second-rate person who pushed, he was a dictator, who was ultimately deposed. And so there's an energetic commonality. Like I've done past life matches, just recently did a past life match with the man that I saw in this movie, Bad Faith, which is a documentary I really recommend. I just saw it this week. And the man, Paul Wyrick, I believe his name is. I'd never seen it before. But when I looked at him, he just had that thing, right? And so I did a past life match for him, and I forget the guy's name. I wrote it down, but I matched him to a person who was, in my opinion, a general in the German army. So and I said the same thing with Steve Bannon. I matched Steve Bannon to a man named Rover, Karl Rover, which is kind of a fun name for a Republican, who was a go-lighter in the Republican Party. So there's that, to me, there is this collective energy from that period drawn to people like Orban or Putin, because it's a style that they're used to. And people may be drawn to that, but there's not enough foundational energy within the United States for that to be sustained for over a long period of time. Germany was a different situation. United States, in some senses, is too powerful. I believe that part of what happened with Hitler in the 30s was an outgrowth of the Depression in 1929. But the past life energy, what past life energy is really about an emotional style. So a past life is really a template for how you process information, a pervasive way of processing information. So I think that people process information in a certain way, so that may be consistent. But again, what I look at is the individual energy and the surrounding energy. So I don't think that the time and place for Trump and Bannon and those types of people is supportive. It may have been a few years ago because there's a certain novelty to it. But I think that people are well aware of what the real costs are. And that's why I think that there will be an energetic pushback, which is why I do think that we go back to a happier, friendlier place. And when I said all these things, nobody wanted to hear it. And now, ironically, when I say good things, I think on the horizon, nobody wants to hear that either. And one other thing real quickly, and then I'll shut up for a second. And you probably have to go to break. But over the years, over the past, especially when Trump was president, every time something would happen, there would be all these psychics. So we're going to war with Syria or North Korea or whoever. I'd go, just chill out, dude. Just chill out. Because it goes back to the ways in which people try to make predictions and the way in which they try to read energy. They see a kind of a slam bam, and that slam bam makes a spark. But if there's not an energy surrounding it that is compatible with the intensity of that one little spark, it's going to fade out. So you can make a big noise and it can get people's attention, but if there is not a core emotional collective energy around it, it will fade. And that's why I think that Trump's time will fade. I've been saying it for a long time. I do not think he will win. I guess we'll find out. Historically, I've been right a lot, but I'm not right all the time. And well, there we go. And again, I hope I'm making sense in the ways I'm describing it. But that's the way I see it. I just don't feel that the environment in which they're trying to place these ideas is supportive of those ideas anymore on the level that they need it to be. I believe that Trump will be held accountable for all these crimes. I think he will go to prison. I do think that. I think I don't like the documents case, which just dismissed. I think that will be reversed. I've said that I expected Clarence Thomas to be investigated for past, financial improprieties. So I don't think that just because it seems like, quote unquote, they're getting away with it, I don't let that dissuade me from what I really see long term. So that's where I'm at.
We're gonna take a break. Hang around, people. It's only going to continue to be interesting. Talk to you again in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking today with Andrew Bassano Brewer, who reads the energy of situations. And we've been talking about the political currents happening in the United States right now. We left with a flurry of very specific predictions. I would like to point out to everybody that at this moment, in the middle of the summer 2024, there are two things astrologically that may help you to understand. One of them is that we are in a recurrence of the eclipse patterns from the summer of 1968. And those of you of a certain age might recall how incredibly raucous things were during that summer. And secondly, right now, 3 of the outer planets are retrograde. 2 of them have recently stationed retrograde and haven't started moving, meaning that they're just kind of circling on their spots with the influences getting more and more and more prolonged, and they're going to go forward. And it's not going to be horribly long before we see shoes falling, new developments, rest of the story. So, Andy, where'd you like to take it from here?
I mean, I get any direction you want to go, Kathy. I mean, I think it's going to get kind of wild this summer. I mean, I really do. I mean, there are so many competing narratives. Everybody has a story. Everybody wants to have the definitive story, and nobody really knows. And there is so much fear. Trump is driven now by fear. Fear is never a good motivator. It is not something that is sustainable, and it tends to cause people to be reactionary. And when you're reactionary, you make mistakes. So I think that Trump and the people around him are really feeling the heat. This is my take on him. He has, from an energetic standpoint, I'm sure a lot of your audience have heard about chakras and auras and, those kinds of things. I'm sure this is not foreign concepts. But when you look at Trump, he has a very significant constriction between his heart chakra and his throat chakra. So when you see this energy pattern, and this is a pretty common pattern, actually, it's people feel sad because they're not able to express themselves, because they're not being heard. They feel a certain amount of sadness. And this is the energy that in my opinion is driving Trump right now. So we may see him as this loud, fiery kind of thing. But I think that Trump, not too deep down, is really having some emotional challenges. And he's gotten to this point in his life because he's been historically pretty good at dealing with those, but he has never seen anything like this, nor probably have too many other people. There are also a lot of people around Trump in kind of precarious situations. So again, if we look at Germany as our model, the people that were on the National Socialist bandwagon, it was fun when it worked. It wasn't so much fun in Nuremberg, and it wasn't so much fun after the fact, right? And so there is payback time. And I think that payback is on the horizon. And I think that the summer will be a lot of people trying to distort reality as much as possible. A lot of competing narratives, a lot of stories coming out everywhere. And my advice for people is to try to just stay calm. Don't get too caught up in individual plot points, but to try to look at the collective, just like everybody's worried about is the stage, the thing on Saturday, something happened. Somebody had a gun, people died. But it does not fundamentally change the story of Trump. It does not fundamentally change the narrative of our collective future. And I think people, in my opinion, are wasting too much time. Is it staged? Was it fake blood or whatever? It doesn't make that much difference, I don't think. And that's why this summer will be a challenge to people who get caught up in everything. Oh my God, this happened. It changed. No, it doesn't. These are small little points of contact. They do not fundamentally, in most cases, make a difference. And so my advice for people is to just try to stay zen, kick back, and not get too caught up in the weeds, and to try to take a higher vantage point so that you can really understand the motivations for people. People will tell you who they are, but not directly to your face. You have to kind of peek around the corner to see what's going on. So yeah,
So it
I
might
think the summer is going to be entertaining.
It might be an interesting challenge for people to themselves start experimenting with reading the energy around situations and noticing signs of either inattention or incompetence or nervousness or anxiety. And you and I both have seen, me based on the astrology, you based on what you do, a very public event with that makes cognitive problems unmistakable. And it's so fascinating that there's so much projecting from one side to the other. Like we've gotten a foretaste of it with Biden doing so abysmally at the debate, but the real cognitive issues are on the other side of the race. And you and I have both said there will be a very public event where it is unmistakable. Now you saw him falling to the ground, which already has happened, but there's more to go energetically with that, right?
Yeah, and it also goes to the ways in which stories are framed. So you have to try to, in my opinion, detach yourself from the way the story is sold to you. The Republicans are masters at this. They're very good at it. But if you look at, like, I was one of the early, very early people to push back against QAnon. I call them QAnon, and and I was, and it really annoyed me, of course, that there was this trying to take concepts that were grounded in spiritual truth and just distort them beyond distortion. But if you look at the things that were driving focal points for QAnon, where they're pointing fingers, in almost every case, this is narcissism 101, the people who are most guilty of that are the people who are doing the finger pointing, right? So there's a form of projection, there's a form of bait and switch. And I think that, again, the collective intelligence and rationality of the United States is far superior to what the MAGA world needs in order for them to kind of skate through. I think there's too many people kind of onto the game here. But yeah, they've changed the language and they've changed the story. But I think that it kind of boomerangs back against them. I do think that there's a lot of unhappy times for some of these high-end Republicans because they've done things that, as long as they can create a climate where you can't really rationally have a conversation, right? As long as people can't push through that, then they can still kind of skate along. But I think that time is coming. And I think President Biden is really kind of a hammer to put it to him, truthfully. I think there's still, you've talked about this, I think there's still plenty of gas in his tank. And some of the things that you've looked about when you did his solar return chart, really, I think, speak to that pretty eloquently, truthfully.
Yeah, that's one thing that gives me great comfort. Everyone out there, I have a long interview that's up on my YouTube channel, which is Professional Aquarian, with a reader from Canada, Soul Print Intuitive Tarot. And I looked at solar return charts for Trump and Biden. And Trump's has a packed 12th house, which is confinement.
Not good.
And Biden's solar return chart has Mars on the midheaven, in the 9th house on the midheaven. We were talking about something on an angle, pushing it forward. Yeah, this is like on fire. And his birthday's in November, so on fire, tons of energy, just taking him on through.
So by having a planet with the kind of energy that Mars has, and having it in a place where it has prominence, right at the very tippity top, the highest point in the sky, right at the midheaven, this adds to, I think Mars is a planet that wants to be seen. There are other planets, so maybe Neptune or other planets that maybe like to work behind the scenes. But Mars is a hellraiser. It wants to be out and about. So having Mars in Biden's chart this way, to me, is a significator that he's going to come six guns blazing. And I do think that he is. I think he's going to be re-energized here. And all those planets in the 12th house, if my initial psychological profile of Trump is true, then his fears, his sense of inadequacy, his belief that he's not good enough and he deserves to lose, this to me is the key point to Trump. I believe that he thinks he deserves to lose, and I think he is pushing all his chips to one number so he can lose it all at one time. This is what I've predicted for a long time, and I stand by that. And so far, again, historically, I've been pretty close with it. We'll see.
And this does match what's going on astrologically, because Uranus is up there in his in the 10th house, the most public house. It's moved across his midheaven, and using a very technical a technique called converse solar arc project. His converse solar arc Pluto is going to move across the same spot in November. Basically, the two planets of massive change, unpredictable, radical change, and unavoidable change, are moving across the part of his chart that deals with his career, his place in the world, his home, his family, you name it. And that equals everything at once, which is what you've seen consistently.
And there's another element in Trump's chart that I think is important. So if you look at the idea, the degree a year theory of progressions, Trump just turned 78. 78 degrees from, his Mars puts him right down at the bottom of the chart. And I think he's moving into this place where daddy issues, the Fred Trump issue that, in my opinion, drives Trump, will become more dominant. And as he gets older, and as his cognitive, and on all the energetic photos I've done, I consistently draw this thing here. There's a prefrontal lobe issue with Trump, I believe. And so that will oftentimes be a situation where there's not, the circulation to the brain is not working as well. You often see that with decline in language skills, pre-dementia. But as Trump's ability to keep it all together and remember his lies simplistically fades, then, the wheels could fall off pretty quickly. I still maintain that Trump's basic core emotion is, I don't feel worthy, but you ain't the boss of me anyway. And so that sets up a disparity. When there's a disparity, especially with someone who is in such a public space, by being in that space, if there's an imbalance, what he's doing is he's inviting people to push that imbalance. So that's why if he's tilted by being in a public space, he invites a pushback against that tilt, which is why he stands a greater chance of being blown over. The energy matters, and the ways in which people inhabit space matters. It matters in the ways in which they manifest things in their life. It manifests in the ways in which they deal with adversity. Trump has been good at pushing back against adversity, but if he's leaning back energetically, then he doesn't have the same kind of trajectory here, and then his normal mode of operations will fail. And because there is such a collective wave against him, if he falls back, it's like the building falls over. That's what I think will happen to Trump.
And so taking the approach of the elevated view of going up in our little Piper Cub or whatever, it's easy to put the focus on one person, but there's really so much more going on politically in this country, there are influences. Don't you sense energies of bigger forces that have been playing a role, steering things, moving puzzle pieces
Absolutely.
around?
Trump's irrelevant. Trump can only happen if there's a foundation in place that allows Trump to happen. In 1973, when Nixon, right before he left, in 74, there would be a pushback against what Trump was doing. So there has to be a foundation from which that weed can grow, right? Well, if not, that would have been the weed whacker, Trump would have been gone. There have to be elements of power way beyond Trump. And Trump as an individual can only do so much. There have to be things in place, corporate things in place, all sorts of things, media things in place, the ways that the narratives are framed. And we could go from conspiratorial standpoint here. If rich people own radio stations and TV stations and they like tax breaks, is that an impetus for them to frame the ways in which they present the news and say Trump's okay, but Biden's too old? Again, why do we choose to focus on the things we do? What's the motivation? Understanding motivation. It's not rocket science what I do. It's just that I try not to, it's really not. I just try not to let other people tell me what to think. Like, I use this analogy a lot. If I'm in a group, like I look out the window, sky looks blue to me. If I'm in a group and there's 12 people and 11 people go, "Oh my God, the sky is such a lovely orange," I would use a bad word here, but I go, the sky is orange. The sky is blue, excuse me. It looks blue to me. It's blue. I don't care what you all think. I'm saying it's blue. But a lot of people would go, I can see the orange of it. It's important, again, this is an editorial, it's important that we stick to our truth and we not let other people push us out of that truth. And that's why I think that Trump will fail, because I don't think people will be pushed out of their truth, because I think there are enough other people that will say the sky's blue. Where maybe in 2017, yeah, I guess it's orange. You know this, but maybe people watching this, I had so many people that would write me, "Oh, I just love what you're saying. Just keep doing it." I go, "Well, but I'm afraid to like it or comment because I don't want anybody to know what you're saying." I go, "Well, it's kind of dangerous for me, but thank you." But now that fear, I think, is dissipated. That's why I think that there are more people that will stand up together, more people feel empowered. That's why Trump's going to have a bad time. And that's why he will lose. That's my opinion. That's my prediction.
No matter,
we'll see.
No matter what things look like this summer or at this
Pardon
moment.
Me?
No matter what things look like this summer or at this moment.
You have to look at the trajectory. You have to look at the elements that are, and what's driving this is an emotional cloud. Do we have sunshine, or do we want to just have a flood? Are we looking to have a party, or do we want Armageddon and end times? I think there's more people that want to have a party, and I don't think people want to burn the earth to the ground so they can go be judged for heaven. I just don't think that that's the stronger push, and that's why I think that there'll be a pushback, and this Christian nationalist, whatever it is, will fail. It's a con. Like if you take a first grader and he pushes back against a Sunday school teacher, there's a reason, because the story that the Sunday school teacher is trying to tell him makes no sense, and a 6-year-old can see it. It's not much different now. You have to suspend belief and go into, like QAnon, you have to suspend belief and go into some crazy town in order for all the things to go together. But people are too smart. The United States has too many rational, friendly, happy, sane people for this to continue. And that's why I persist in my belief and public predictions that Trump will lose. And that's really the reason for it.
And a lot of people are simply exhausted of being confronted with
Absolutely.
this.
And that's a strategy. That's a strategy. If you're exhausted, you don't want to push back, but you have to push back. At a minimum, you just can't let it get so it all just becomes a jumble. You have to have some emotional clarity, and that emotional clarity comes from confidence. What a big part of the Republican drive to frame language is to try to make people question themselves. Again, QAnon. I mean, how do you take this thing and this thing and this thing and come up with that? So in order to do that, you have to somehow change your whole mental processing. And once you do that, that becomes a style of engagement with the universe. People forget how to think. But I don't think everybody's forgotten. And I think there's a renewed interest in reality. And Love and Light Land, and you see me write about this a lot, has sold us out. And I think people are catching on to that as well, which I think is a good thing. So that's my speech.
That's a great one. All right. So where can people find you? You are heavily in two places. One of them is Facebook, correct?
Facebook, because I'm an old man, I can only use one thing. And the other is my website is Andrew, ANDREW dash BREWER. So Andrew-Brewer.com. And, but yeah, Facebook, Andrew Bassano Brewer.
And you have your.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Oh, right. But you've got missives on a regular basis on Facebook. And you and I will periodically hit a point of, I'm not going to talk about this, and we'll try to hole up, and then gradually we just give in and answer things that people are hounding us about. So anyway, you also have, yes? When you saw?
When I saw the debate, I knew I had to kind of be more public again. So.
It's all part of the punching Nazis goal of your life. So
for sure,
what you do.
For sure.
But you also have,
it is a mission.
You also have an account at Medium.
Yes, I have an account at Medium, and I was like a big thing on Medium for a while. Then I got mad and quit, and I just started doing it again. And I'm not even sure what my handle is on Medium, but I'm not really good at marketing. I don't even know who I am, but I'm on Medium again. But everything I have on Medium is on Facebook too. So just it's free on Facebook.
You can follow him, and it's always an interesting viewpoint. Oh,
thank you.
They're getting. Oh, wait a minute. We actually have a question. Many have mentioned that Trump's Jupiter will always protect him. No, it will not. Watch the video on Professional Aquarian from earlier this week. His time is coming this before the end of the summer. Jupiter's going to be part of his trouble. So don't fear not, people. Okay, don't worry. Thank you so much, Andy. It's always fun talking with you. Everybody I get to talk to.
You too, Kathy. Thank you.
We make sense of the world, and he talks me periodically off the ledge, although I don't go out there all that often. Remember, everyone, my forecasts are at empowermentunlimited.net and at ohmtimes.com, where I also have a guide to Mercury retrograde. And in August, Mercury's going to go retrograde again. So you will want to check that out. And also, my YouTube channel is Professional Aquarian. And I have a long, like a 45-minute interview with Soulprint Intuitive Tarot, going through the astrology of the politics for the rest of the year. And I have the beats of changes in Trump's fortune, and also things for Biden and Harris as well. So thanks, everybody. Go off in your little Piper Cub. Join us up there. Fly above it all. And we'll be dancing in the streets in a few months. Thanks. See you guys again.
Good.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. Thank you.